Good afternoon and welcome to the Trigg Minerals Investor Webinar. All the attendees are in listen-only mode. Today we have Chief Geologist Jonathan King, who will provide a detailed discussion on the recently announced updated mineral resource estimate for Trigg's Wild Cattle Creek deposit, part of the Achilles Antimony project in New South Wales. I will now hand over to Jonathan.
Good one. Thank you there, Kristen. Welcome, everybody. Please bear with me. We've just thrown this quick presentation together just literally about 5 minutes ago. So we'll work our way through it and we'll see how we go. And I believe at the end we'll be answering some questions. So the obvious disclaimer, let's ignore that. Let's just locate ourselves first. As you can see, the Achilles project with our Wild Cattle Creek sits up in the northeastern corner of the map area here, and it's also in the northeastern corner of New South Wales. That number that you see associated there with Wild Cattle Creek is, of course, the former number. So that is the anchor generated number from 2013. The other tenements are just our portfolio, our antimony focused portfolio. So coming into the project itself, you can see that the deposit is located relatively central within the tenement area. We are about 40 kilometres west of Coffs Harbour, and underneath that statement you can see the new resource number. So we've gone from roughly 15,600 tonnes of contained metal to now 29,900 tonnes of contained metal. So we've basically doubled the resource. We've applied the same cutoff at this point in time, which is 1%. And so you can gather there has been substantial growth in this resource. And I'll go to some extent in this discussion to try and explain how that result has happened. I guess the important thing also to note at this point in time, because we'll come back to it again and again, is that Wild Cattle Creek sits within the Bealsdown Fault. The Bealsdown Fault literally runs almost east-west across that diagram. And at this point in time, really, all drilling is focused around the Wild Cattle Creek area. We see that structure as being loaded with antimony, and basically it's underexplored. Coming into the resource itself, on the right-hand side, at least my right, you'll see the anchor model, which proposes that we have some plunging mineralization, which is plunging west at around 25 degrees. Now, through our modeling efforts, which is the diagram on my left, you can see that that isn't perhaps necessarily true. It could be true. The mineralization could still be plunging. But really what we've determined is that the plunge interpretation is really an artifact of the drilling density. We go from a densely drilled area, which is really over the main part of the shallow mineralization, so the up-dip mineralization. And then as we step out to the west, the drill spacing, the drilling density lowers, and we're getting an implied plunge. It may be true, it may not be true. But the one thing we can say is that when you come into our model on the left, is that we do see a series of high-grade shoots which are dipping. So these are dipping and they're open, often below the position of the mineralization. Now, you might imply that there is in fact a much steeper plunge on the shoot control, on this high-grade shoot control. And in fact, that is something that we will need to explore. So I guess the key point I'm trying to make here is that in some ways, the previous perception was handicapping us. And now with our new geological model and our new resource model, we're able to see the structure of the mineralization a bit better. And through doing this work, we've actually been able to establish that the opportunity is probably just growing. It's just getting better. And that is very, very exciting to us. If again, we look at that diagram on the left, you can see that some of the mineralization is definitely open to the west. It's open at depth, and there is even a suggestion that it is still open to the east as well. So what we're dealing with here is an ore body that is grossly under-drilled at this point in time. Most of the resource is sitting basically in the top 100 meters, with really only the western extremities tested to any great depth. So we see this mineralization as really wide open, and what it could deliver, we don't know. If we have a look at the grade distribution underneath and on the left diagram, you can see that these blocks are really quite consistent. There's some lovely high grade mineralization, and perhaps I'll take this opportunity to differentiate between the work that we did versus the work that Anchor did. Now, the pricing structure for Anchor was very different for antimony to what it is for us. For Anchor, the pricing structure was around $13,000 a tonne, $10,000 to $13,000 a tonne US, whereas we are currently looking at a pricing structure of 41,500. So that is a tremendous uplift in price. And of course, if you can do the math, you'll very quickly figure out that 30,000 tonne times $40,000 US equals a significant in-ground value, which really we probably shouldn't mention, but anyway, it's mentioned, so too late. The focus on antimony, on Wild Cattle Creek for Anchor was, of course, the high-grade core. They needed that high-grade core to make this thing have any possibility of working. We in Trigg are a little bit more, we benefit from that high price, and as a consequence, we're able to capture a lot more than just the high-grade core. So you may remember in previous discussions that we've discussed this alteration halo that has developed around and encapsulates the high-grade core. So the high-grade core for Anchor really focused on the red and the yellow, and that zone averaged about 5 meters wide. For us, we're able to capture the stockwork system, which sits adjacent to and encapsulates the high-grade core. And then there's the antimony rosettes, which sit outside of the stockwork system, and we may have captured some of that within the resource model. I think the big thing is we go from an average width of 5 meters to, well, we're somewhere between 2 and 25 meters, and I would suggest our average width is probably more likely to be about 15 meters at this point in time. So that's a substantial volume increase, and of course that means we're capturing a lot more metal, and that is reflected in the new number. The diagram to the left, my left, you can just see essentially the distribution pattern here. And once more, it's showing you the deeper drilling on the western side of the ore body versus the concentration of the drilling around the shallower up dip parts of the ore body. Here's a cleaner diagram to show you again that the bulk of the drilling is really quite shallow. And to us, that leaves a lot of room, especially down in this neck of the woods. And if I just flip back up in the diagram, you can see that there's a big chute out on the eastern side. There's potentially another chute sitting through here, coming down this way. This one could be coming through here. There's another one sitting out here. Now, how many of these chutes we have, we don't know. And that's because the mineralization at this point in time, in our view, remains open in all directions. So that diagram just paints the picture. Unfortunately, because of the vertical exaggeration here, you're not really capturing the change in width that you're seeing. You might see it a little bit in the top diagram, but really it is thinnest in the east and it's thickening towards the west. And of course, where is our exploration focus going to be? Well, it's going to be on the guts of this material here, drilling that out to depth, and then, of course, out here to the west where the mineralization is clearly still open. Another important consideration to make is that, as we go down this ore body, our gold grades are increasing. Not are they just increasing, the widths are also increasing. And we have formed a view in Trigg that this antimony system is sitting on top of a gold system. And so the second objective of Trigg's drilling campaign will be not just to drill out the antimony and firm up those numbers and promote in category as we move towards pre-feasibility studies. We will also be drilling underneath deeper, trying to close out these chutes, but also testing the underlying gold system and building that as a resource, if it's there. Unfortunately, I didn't get time to put the key diagram in, which shows the extension of the ore system in plan view, where you can see how the mineralization is pinching and swelling, and then that it's open to the west. I just ran out of time. A quick look at the ore body itself and the categories. And as you can see, we've got a lot of green, which is our indicated category. 2/3 of this deposit is sitting in indicated, and then 1/3 is sitting in inferred. The indicated category really is very, very dependent on a lot of the historical drilling. And if you've read the MRE, you would have seen that, or there were many comments made about the fact that we needed to rebuild the database, and we needed to recapture a lot of this original data, and then bring it into the model. Now, there are still issues with that data. We still need to clean it up some more. And certainly to advance this thing to the next levels, we need to come back into this historical area and drill more holes. So we will be doing that. That is the plan. And that will promote these things up in category so that we can advance with our studies. Quick comparison of the resource as it stands now. You can see the SRK number up on top, 15,642 tonnes of contained metal. The ratios are roughly the same. They were 2/3 in indicated, 1/3 in inferred. We preserve that 2/3 in indicated, 1/3 in inferred, but our resource has grown dramatically. The tonnage has grown dramatically, and as a consequence, of course, because we're capturing more volume, the grade has come down a little, but it's still very, very high grade. Both of those, as you can see, are using a 1% cutoff. If we look across at the 2% cutoff, it really gives you a good indication of that this number for Anchor was actually quite accurate. We deliver 15,730 tonne of contained metal. They were 15,000 at a 2% cutoff, and they were 15,642 tonnes of contained metal. So their 1% cutoff really was just telling us they're focused on the high-grade core. That high-grade core is basically running 2% plus antimony, and hence you would expect these numbers to be the same, and they basically are. So there is accuracy in the resource models. Just really to step out from Wild Cattle Creek itself, I've pretty much explained that the program for next year is really community consultation. The environmental mapping baseline studies will get implemented. One thing that I haven't mentioned that I'll focus on now is very quickly that we want to use, in the meantime, as we get our drilling approvals in place, we want to do some geophysics. We intend to use the geophysics firstly to map Wild Cattle Creek, and assuming that we can see it and see it well, then we will step out along the plane of the Bealsdown Fault, and we'll look for, I guess, analogous patterns, which we would suggest would be further mineralization, and ultimately we'll look to drill test those. But we're planning, or we're defining a strategy that will move us from being a 30,000 tonne project to a 100,000 tonne minimum. So that's what we're looking for to come out of this project area. We'll use the geophysics to drive it, and of course the geophysics will then help really refine our drilling program, which will be focused on building out that resource and then building a gold resource that underlies the antimony. The regional targets, there's 6 known historical mines at this point in time on the project area. You can see them here: Fletcher's Mine, Graham and Navins, Jezebel, and then there's Wild Cattle Creek East. Sorry about the typo in there. Paddy's Plain down here. Really, I'm not so positive about this area. Just seems to be you're in a change of geology down through this section. So I'd rather be focused back up in this part of the world. And the green dots that you see here are our mercury gas targets, where if we see mercury, we equate mercury with seeing stibnite, because mercury is part of the mineralizing system at Wild Cattle Creek. And therefore, as I said, if we can see mercury vapor, we equate that with stibnite. We've got 30 other targets to these regional targets. And that just means that this project to us is wide open and has huge potential to grow significantly beyond basically the 30,000 tonnes that it is currently. So I think it's very early days. The main system at Wild Cattle Creek is open in all directions. We know there's a gold system underlying. I mean, it's just an amazing project. And I think that we will leave it there. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Jonathan. We now have time for a Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question directly to the company, please enter your question into the Q&A panel within Zoom. I'll start with one question we received via email. How many other more regional antimony prospects are there?
So within this project, at the moment, we really have the 6 historical targets, and there's the 30 gas targets. I mean, how many of those convert, we don't know at this point in time. They are sitting in what we interpret to be sub-parallel structures to the Bealsdown fault. So really, this thing is a blank template, and it could contain a massive amount of metal. Sorry, can I just digress in my response? One thing I forgot to mention to everybody is that, as I said, this thing is about, it's between 2 and 25 meters wide. And if you look at across most other projects here in Australia or overseas, antimony projects, you will see that most of these antimony mines are very narrow. They're 2 to 3 meters and maybe up to 5 meters. So again, what that is doing is just telling you that this thing is very unique, it's very different, and I think it's got this amazing potential to grow beyond belief. So stepping back into the question, we have at this point in time 36 odd targets on this ground, and of course through our portfolio we have a number of other targets. I think that we would be rounding that out at over 100 all up. And if you've got 100 targets, really on your other ground, you've got the amazing potential to convert on several of those too. So I think for Trigg, we're in a fantastic space. It's a very exciting space, and everything that we have is just painting a great picture of a solid future, which will be underpinned by the development of the Wild Cattle Creek resource.
Thanks, Jonathan. We've got a question received. It's three-parted question. With the updated MRE, why wasn't the gold and tungsten values included? When can we expect an updated MRE with these values? And why was the choice to use a 1% cutoff grade retained?
Okay. So I alluded to the issues regarding the database earlier. We are still capturing the gold and the tungsten values, so hence they weren't included. The gold and tungsten values are not necessarily present in all the drilling programs. So I think that realistically, we know they're there, but the updated MRE, which considers those numbers, will come in probably at a later date after our maiden drill campaign here. In terms of 1%, we ran with 1% primarily because that's what most of our peers are using, but also we really wanted to compare our resource directly with the preceding resource. We don't necessarily believe that it reflects the economic cutoff grade. I think that for an open pit scenario, that number will be much lower. For an underground scenario, it might be at that number, possibly slightly higher. And that was really the point of showing the 2% cutoff, that we've still got plenty of viable metal to support an underground operation. So I hope that's enough. And I missed the middle part, I think, of that one there, Kristen. Could you repeat that one?
When can we expect an updated MRE with these values?
Oh, sorry, I did answer that. I do think that that will be after we complete our maiden drill campaign, and at that point we'll marry everything together. So
Thanks.
you are talking next year.
All right, fantastic. Next question. What is the next immediate priority target at Wild Cattle Creek?
I think it has to be Jezebel. Jezebel sits about 500 meters to the east of Wild Cattle Creek. There's a 1%. There's 3 drill holes in that area. 2 of them carried anomalous antimony values. One of them carried an intersection of, I think it was 1.3 meters at 11.8%, or it might be 1.8 meters at 11.3%. Sorry, the numbers are all a bit blur at the moment. Anchor identified Jezebel as essentially the next repetition of the Wild Cattle Creek system along strike. Our work at this point in time supports that view, and I would think that Jezebel will become a primary focus where we look for a repetition to Wild Cattle Creek. And funny enough, there is another position which is about 500 meters to the west of Wild Cattle Creek, where we again see similar numbers in the rock chips, and the system starts to look very, very similar to what we have at Wild Cattle Creek.
Excellent, thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions. The next one I have, what is the gold potential at Wild Cattle Creek, and is there potential for a gold deposit at depth, just like Hillsgrove?
Yes. We do know that in the upper parts of the ore body, it is very antimony dominant. Gold is a lot less dominant. But as we move down the system, like we see at Hillgrove, it also switches from an antimony-rich upper part to a gold-rich lower part. We think we're going to see the same thing here. We are seeing that already in the drill results, but there is such a lack of drilling at depth that it's indicative at the moment that we are, but it's only indicative. We believe we will see it.
Excellent, thank you. All right, one last question. Is the Tawinga silver mine on granted tenements, and how is the grade potential there?
Tawinga sits on a recently or soon to be granted title. I think it's been granted. We've just got to finish our paperwork. It sits on the Taylor's Arm East tenement, so it's in the next project to the south from Achilles. It's right out near Maxville. It looks to be an amazing, or should I say, have amazing potential. There was a 23.5 ton, so 23.5 ton bulk sample, which graded over 4,000 grams per ton, or 147.7 ounces to the ton. So it gives the suggestion that it's very, very rich. It's 4 to 5 meters wide. So again, lovely thick vein system. I guess we would argue at this point in time, the tenement's only just been granted. There's a lot of work that we have to do in order to gain access to that. And our priority really is at this point in time to get stuck into Wild Cattle Creek. So it's there. It's great to have it in our portfolio. It will get attention, but it's going to come later in the mix. It's not going to come early. It will be deferred. This is the priority. This is the vehicle that's going to drive growth in Trigg. And growth for our shareholders, and the silver will come later.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you for everyone who dialed in. A copy of this replay will be made available on the Trigg Minerals website and on their social media, X and LinkedIn. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time.
Good one. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope it went well. Cheers.